A young extra fainted during Casablanca. Bogart's quiet gesture that night became Hollywood legend. Chapter 1. August 1942. Burbank, California. The Warner Brothers lot sits beneath a sky heavy with summer heat. Inside Stage 8, the air is thick, almost suffocating. Dozens of extras stand packed together under blazing lights, waiting for their moment in what would become one of the most celebrated films in cinema history. They are dressed in heavy wool coats and formal attire, sweat pooling beneath layers of costume fabric. The scene being filmed is Rick's Cafe, the heart of Casablanca. And somewhere in that crowd, a 19-year-old girl named Eleanor Mitchell stands perfectly still, fighting to remain conscious. She had arrived in Hollywood 6 months earlier, carrying nothing but a cardboard suitcase and a dream that felt impossibly distant from the Nebraska cornfields she had left behind. Her father had told her she was foolish. Her mother had cried at the train station, but Eleanor believed, with the fierce certainty of youth, that she was meant for something more than a life of dust and silence. For 6 months, she had survived on crackers and hope. She had walked miles to auditions that led nowhere. She had slept in a boarding house with 11 other girls, all of them chasing the same impossible dream. And now, finally, she had earned her place among the extras in a real motion picture. $3 a day, a chance to breathe the same air as Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman. The director, Michael Curtis, was a perfectionist, known for his explosive temper and relentless demands. He had already ordered 15 takes of the same scene. The extras were exhausted. The crew was tense. And Eleanor, who had eaten nothing but a stale roll that morning because she was saving every penny to send back home, felt the room beginning to spin. She pressed her fingernails into her palm, trying to anchor herself to consciousness. She focused on Bogart, who stood just 20 feet away, his face illuminated by the carefully positioned lights. He was shorter than she had expected. His suit was slightly rumpled, but there was something about the way he held himself, a quiet authority that made everyone around him seem smaller. The cameras rolled. Curtis called for action. The scene began again. Eleanor tried to focus. She tried to remember her instructions. Stand here. Look natural. Do not draw attention. But the heat was unbearable. The lights were blinding. And suddenly, the floor seemed to rise up to meet her. She collapsed without a sound. In the chaos of a film set, such incidents are handled with brutal efficiency. Production cannot stop. Time is money. The standard protocol was simple. Remove the obstacle, replace the extra, continue shooting. Eleanor expected to wake up on the sidewalk outside the studio gates. Her brief Hollywood career ended before it truly began. But that is not what happened. When Eleanor opened her eyes, she was lying on a cot in a dimly lit corner of the soundstage. Someone had loosened her costume. A wet cloth had been placed on her forehead, and sitting beside her, holding a glass of water, was Humphrey Bogart himself. She thought she was dreaming. Bogart did not smile. He did not offer comforting words or empty platitudes. He simply held out the glass and said, in that distinctive voice that would echo through cinema history, "Drink this." Slowly. Eleanor obeyed. Her hands were trembling. She wanted to apologize, to explain, to beg for another chance. But Bogart stopped her before she could speak. "When did you last eat?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. She hesitated. She considered lying, but something in his eyes, a directness that seemed to see through all pretense, made her tell the truth. "Yesterday morning," she whispered. Bogart said nothing. He stood up, walked to the craft services table, and returned with a sandwich, an apple, and a small carton of milk. He placed them on the cot beside her with the same casual precision he brought to everything he did. "Eat," he said. "All of it. Then we will talk." Eleanor ate. She ate slowly at first, conscious of being watched, embarrassed by her own hunger. But Bogart did not watch. He turned away, lit a cigarette, and stared at nothing in particular, giving her the dignity of privacy in her most vulnerable moment. When she finished, he sat down again. "What is your name?" he asked. "Eleanor Mitchell." "Where are you from, Eleanor Mitchell?" "Nebraska, a small town, you would not have heard of it." Bogart nodded. "I am from New York, a neighborhood you would not have heard of either. We all come from somewhere nobody remembers." He paused, exhaling a thin stream of smoke. "This business," he continued, "will eat you alive if you let it. It does not care about your dreams. It does not care about your talent. It cares only about what you can give it today, this moment, this take. And if you cannot give it what it wants, it will replace you without a second thought." Eleanor felt tears threatening to fall. She had heard this speech before in different forms from different people. She had prepared herself for rejection, but hearing it from Bogart, in this moment of unexpected kindness, felt different. It felt like truth, delivered by someone who had earned the right to speak it. But then Bogart leaned forward, and his voice softened. "That does not mean you quit," he said. "It means you learn to survive. It means you eat breakfast before you come to set, even if it is just bread and water. It means you save your strength for the moments that matter. It means you remember that no one in this town will take care of you except yourself." He stood up, crushing his cigarette beneath his heel. "You have today and tomorrow left on this picture. Show up, do your job, do not faint again, and when this is over, come find me. I know some people who might be able to help you find steady work." With that, he walked away, returning to his mark just as Curtis called for another take. Eleanor sat in the shadows, clutching the empty milk carton, unable to fully comprehend what had just happened. Humphrey Bogart, the star of the picture, had noticed her, had helped her, had spoken to her as if she were a human being, not just a faceless body filling space in the background of his scene. She did not know it then, but that moment would change the entire trajectory of her life. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. Stories like this one, stories of quiet decency in a world that has forgotten what that means, are what we share here every week. If you believe that kindness still matters, that character is more important than fame, then you belong here with us. Subscribe now, because the best stories are never about the spotlight. They are about the moments that happen in the shadows. Chapter 2. The next 2 days of filming passed in a blur. Eleanor returned to the set as Bogart had instructed. She ate breakfast each morning, even when her stomach protested the early hour. She stood where she was told to stand. She moved when she was told to move. She did not draw attention to herself, and she did not faint, but she watched. She watched Bogart navigate the complex dynamics of the set with an ease that seemed almost supernatural. She watched him argue with Curtis about blocking and motivation, never backing down, but never losing his temper either. She watched him treat the crew members with the same respect he showed his co-stars, learning their names, asking about their families, remembering details that most leading men would never bother to notice. She watched, and she learned. On her final day as an extra, Eleanor gathered her courage and approached him during a break in filming. He was sitting alone, reading a newspaper, a cup of coffee growing cold beside him. "Mr. Bogart," she said, her voice steadier than she expected, "I wanted to thank you for what you did." He looked up, and for a moment she was certain he did not remember her, but then something shifted in his expression, a flicker of recognition that softened the hard lines of his face. "Nebraska," he said. "You made it through." "Yes, sir." "And you ate breakfast?" "Every morning." The corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. He folded the newspaper and set it aside. "Sit down," he said. "Tell me about yourself." Eleanor hesitated. She had prepared herself for a quick dismissal, perhaps a perfunctory introduction to some assistant or secretary who might eventually help her find work. She had not prepared for a conversation, but she sat, and she talked. She told him about Nebraska, about the farm that had been in her family for 3 generations, about the drought that had destroyed everything, about her father's pride and her mother's quiet suffering. She told him about the day she had seen her first motion picture, a flickering image on a sheet hung in the town hall, and how she had known with absolute certainty that she needed to be part of that magic. She told him about the journey to California, about the disappointments and the near misses, about the nights she had spent crying into her pillow, wondering if she should just give up and go home. Bogart listened without interrupting. He lit one cigarette after another, his eyes never leaving her face. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You know," he said finally, "I used to think this business was about talent, about being the best actor in the room, about having the right look, the right voice, the right timing. And maybe some of that matters, but the older I get, the more I realize it is about something else entirely." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "It is about survival. It is about showing up when you do not want to show up. It is about being kind when everyone around you is cruel. It is about remembering who you are when this town tries to tell you that you are nobody." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "You have something, Nebraska. I do not know if it is talent. I do not know if it is luck, but you have something. A fire that has not gone out yet, even though this place has done everything it can to extinguish it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. It was simple, unadorned, bearing only a name and a telephone number. "This is a friend of mine," he said. "She runs a small theater company in the valley. Nothing glamorous, no lights, no cameras, Just good work with good people. Call her. Tell her I sent you. She will give you a chance." Eleanor took the card with trembling fingers. She wanted to say something profound, something that would convey the depth of her gratitude, but the words would not come. Bogart seemed to understand. He stood up, straightening his jacket, preparing to return to the set. "One more thing," he said. "This business will try to make you hard. It will try to convince you that kindness is weakness, that compassion is a liability. Do not believe it. The best people I have known in this town are the ones who never forgot how to be human. Remember that." He walked away without looking back. Eleanor sat alone for a long time, staring at the business card in her hand. She did not know that she was holding the key to everything that would follow. She did not know that the woman whose name was printed on that card would become her mentor, her friend, and eventually the person who would launch her career. All she knew in that moment was that Humphrey Bogart had seen her, not as an extra, not as a background face in a crowd scene, but as a human being, struggling and striving and refusing to give up. And that was enough. The filming of Casablanca continued for several more weeks. Eleanor was not there to see it, but years later, when she finally watched the completed film in a theater, she would search the crowd scenes, looking for her own face. She never found it. Perhaps she had been cut. Perhaps she had simply blended into the anonymous mass of bodies that filled Rick's cafe. It did not matter. What mattered was what had happened off camera. What mattered was a glass of water, a sandwich, and a business card. What mattered was a moment of unexpected kindness that rippled outward through decades, touching lives that Bogart would never know he had changed. That is the thing about such moments. They seem small when they happen. A few words, a simple gesture, nothing that would make headlines or win awards, but they land in fertile soil, and they grow, and they become something larger than anyone could have imagined. Eleanor did not become a movie star. She did not see her name in lights on Hollywood Boulevard, but she did become something perhaps more valuable, a working actor, a respected teacher, and a keeper of stories that might otherwise have been forgotten. And it all began with a glass of water on a sweltering August afternoon. Chapter 3. Eleanor called the number on the business card the next morning. The woman who answered was named Margaret Chen, a former studio contract player who had walked away from Hollywood at the height of her career to pursue something she considered more meaningful. Her theater company operated out of a converted warehouse in Van Nuys, producing plays that no studio would touch, stories about working people, about immigrants, about the forgotten and the overlooked. Margaret was skeptical at first. She had received many calls from young hopefuls claiming to have connections to famous actors. Most of them were lying. The few who were not were usually disappointed to discover that her theater offered no path to stardom, only hard work and modest pay. But something in Eleanor's voice made her pause. "Bogart sent you?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" Eleanor considered the question. She could have said many things. She could have talked about her talent, her training, her desperate need for work, but instead she told the truth. "I fainted on the set of his picture," she said. "He gave me food and water and told me that kindness is not weakness. Then he gave me your card." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Come in tomorrow," Margaret said finally. 9 o'clock. Do not be late." Eleanor arrived at 8:30. The warehouse was nothing like the glamorous studios she had dreamed about. The walls were bare concrete. The seats were mismatched folding chairs. The stage was a raised platform of plywood and prayer, but there was something alive in that space, an energy she had not felt anywhere else in Hollywood. The actors rehearsing on stage were fully present, fully committed, pouring themselves into their work with an intensity that bordered on reverence. Margaret was a small woman with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. She watched Eleanor watch the rehearsal, and when it ended she approached with measured steps. "What do you see?" she asked. Eleanor thought carefully before answering. "I see people who love what they are doing," she said. "I see people who are not performing for cameras or audiences. They are performing for themselves, for the work." Margaret nodded slowly. "Bogart was right about you," she said. "There is something there. Whether it is enough we will see, but there is something." She handed Eleanor a stack of pages, a script for a play about a group of migrant workers traveling from Oklahoma to California. "Learn the part of Rose," she said. "She is young, she is hungry, she is holding on to hope when everyone around her has given up. I think you might understand her." Eleanor took the script home and read it in one sitting. She read it again the next day and the day after that. She did not just memorize the lines, she absorbed them, letting them settle into her bones until she could not tell where Rose ended and Eleanor began. When she returned to the warehouse a week later, She was ready. Margaret watched her audition in silence, her expression unreadable. When Eleanor finished, she did not applaud. She did not smile. She simply nodded and said, "You have the part. Rehearsals begin Monday." For the next 3 months, Eleanor threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised everyone, including herself. She arrived early and stayed late. She asked questions, listened to criticism, and pushed herself to find depths of emotion she had not known she possessed. The play opened on a rainy November night to an audience of 47 people. There were no reviews, no photographers, no red carpet. But when the lights went down and the curtain rose, Eleanor felt something she had never experienced before, the pure, unfiltered connection between performer and audience, a shared moment of truth that no camera could capture. After the performance, as she was removing her makeup in the cramped dressing room, there was a knock at the door. Standing in the doorway, still wearing his signature trench coat, was Humphrey Bogart. Eleanor could not speak. She could not move. She could only stare as he stepped into the room, removing his hat with the same casual elegance that made him a star. "Margaret told me about the show," he said. "I wanted to see for myself." "You came," Eleanor whispered. "You actually came." Bogart shrugged. "I told you I would help. I like to keep my promises." He sat down in the only available chair, crossing his legs and studying her with those famous eyes. "For you were good tonight," he said. "Better than good. You found something real up there, something that cannot be taught." Eleanor felt tears threatening to fall. She had spent months working for this moment without knowing it. She had poured everything she had into that performance, never imagining that the person who had set her on this path would be there to witness it. "I do not know how to thank you," she said. Bogart waved a dismissive hand. "Do not thank me. Thank yourself. I gave you a phone number. You did the rest. That is how it works in this business. Someone opens a door. You have to walk through it yourself." He stood up, preparing to leave. "Keep working," he said. "Keep learning. And remember what I told you. This business will try to make you hard. Do not let it." He was almost out the door when Eleanor spoke. "Mr. Bogart?" He turned. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you help me? You did not know me. You had no reason to care." For a long moment Bogart was silent. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "Because someone did it for me once," he said. "A long time ago, when I was young and broke and ready to give up, a stranger saw something in me and gave me a chance. I never forgot that, and I swore that if I ever had the power to do the same for someone else, I would." He put his hat back on and turned toward the door. "That is how we survive this business, Nebraska. Not by protecting ourselves from each other, by protecting each other." And then he was gone, disappearing into the rainy night like a character from one of his own films. If this story is touching something inside you right now, if you're feeling that warmth in your chest that comes from witnessing unexpected kindness, then I need you to do something. Leave a comment right now that says, "Kindness changes everything." Just those 3 words. Let me know that you understand what this story is really about. Let me know that you believe, like Bogart believed, that how we treat each other matters more than any success or fame we might achieve. Kindness changes everything. Leave that comment now. Chapter 4. The years that followed were not easy, but they were meaningful. Eleanor continued working with Margaret's theatre company, taking on increasingly complex roles, pushing herself to explore the full range of human experience through her craft. She never became famous. Her name never appeared in headlines, but within the small, tight-knit community of serious actors and theatre artists, she earned a reputation for integrity, commitment, and a generosity of spirit that seemed almost old-fashioned in an industry built on competition and self-promotion. She married in 1947, a quiet ceremony in a small church in Pasadena. Her husband was a carpenter named Thomas, who built sets for the theatre company. He was steady and kind and never once asked her to give up her dreams. When their daughter was born 2 years later, they named her Margaret, after the woman who had given Eleanor her first real chance. Bogart's career, meanwhile, continued its legendary trajectory. Casablanca was released in November 1942 and became an instant classic. He went on to make The African Queen, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, and dozens of other films that cemented his place in cinema history. He won an Academy Award. He married Lauren Bacall. He became a symbol of a certain kind of American masculinity, tough but tender, cynical but romantic, world-weary but fundamentally decent. Eleanor watched his career from a distance, celebrating his successes as if they were her own. She never presumed to contact him. She never sought to capitalize on their brief connection. But she carried his words with her always, a compass that guided her through the difficult terrain of life in a town that had little use for quiet virtues. They met again in 1954 at a screening of Sabrina. Eleanor had been invited by a friend who worked at Paramount, and she had hesitated to attend, feeling out of place among the glamorous crowd of studio executives and movie stars. But something drew her there, a sense that she needed to be present for reasons she could not fully articulate. She was standing alone by the bar, nursing a glass of champagne she did not want, when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Nebraska. She turned. 12 years had passed since that afternoon on the Casablanca set, but Bogart looked almost exactly as she remembered him. A little grayer, perhaps, a few more lines around the eyes, but the same quiet intensity, the same way of looking at a person as if he could see straight through to their core. "Mr. Bogart," she said, surprised that her voice remained steady. "I thought that was you," he said. "I was not sure at first. You look different. I hope better." "Better is not the right word. Settled, like you have found your place." Eleanor nodded. "I think I have. Margaret tells me you are teaching now, training young actors. I did not know you were still in touch with Margaret." Bogart smiled, a rare expression that transformed his entire face. "I check in from time to time. She keeps me informed about the people I send her way. You were one of the good ones." They talked for nearly an hour, standing apart from the crowd, two people connected by a moment that had happened half a lifetime ago. Eleanor told him about her husband, her daughter, the small but satisfying life she had built. Bogart listened with the same focused attention she remembered, asking questions, genuinely interested in the answers. When she asked about his own life, he grew reflective. "You know what I have learned," he said. "After all these years, after all these pictures, after all the awards and the interviews and the nonsense that comes with being what they call a star." "What?" "That none of it matters as much as moments like that one. On the set, when you were lying there and I gave you a glass of water. That moment matters more than Casablanca, more than the Academy Award, more than anything." Eleanor was stunned. "How can you say that? You have achieved everything." Bogart shook his head. "I have achieved what they told me to achieve. I have played the game and won it. But the game is empty, Nebraska. The game is a trick they play on us to keep us hungry and scared and fighting each other instead of helping each other." He paused, taking a long drink from his glass. "The only thing that is real is how we treat the people around us. People. The only thing that lasts is the kindness we show when no one is watching. Everything else is smoke and mirrors." Eleanor did not know what to say. She had spent years admiring Bogart from a distance, imagining that his life was everything hers was not. Glamorous, exciting, filled with meaning. To hear him speak this way was disorienting. Like discovering that a mountain you had climbed toward your entire life was actually a painted backdrop. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "The career, the fame, all of it?" Bogart considered the question carefully. "No," he said finally. "I do not regret it. But I do not believe in it anymore. I used to think that success would make me happy, would fill up some emptiness inside me, but it does not work that way. The emptiness stays, it just becomes more comfortable, like an old coat you have worn so long you forget you are wearing it." He looked at her with something like gratitude. "That is why moments like ours matter, because they remind me that I am more than what they put on screen. They remind me that I am a human being, connected to other human beings, responsible for something larger than my own career." The screening was about to begin. Around them, people were drifting toward the theater, but neither Eleanor nor Bogart moved. "Can I tell you something?" Eleanor said. "Anything. You changed my life, not just by giving me Margaret's number, not just by helping me find work, but by showing me what it means to be a good person in a place that does not value goodness. I have tried to pass that on to the young actors I teach, to my daughter, to everyone I meet. And when they ask me where I learned it, I tell them about you. I tell them about a sandwich and a glass of water, and a moment of unexpected kindness that rippled out through decades." Bogart was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. He was trying to hide. "That is more than any award," he said. "That is more than anything." They parted that night with a handshake that said more than words ever could. Eleanor watched him walk away, disappearing into the crowd of beautiful people, and she understood something she had not fully grasped before. Fame is fleeting. Success is illusory. But kindness, real kindness, the kind that asks nothing in return, the kind that sees another human being in their moment of need and responds with compassion instead of indifference, that kind of kindness echoes forever. She never saw him again. Chapter 5. Humphrey Bogart was diagnosed with esophageal illness in 1956. He died on January 14, 1957, at the age of 57. The news reached Eleanor through the morning paper, and she sat at her kitchen table for an hour, unable to move, unable to speak, while her coffee grew cold beside her. She did not cry. She felt somehow that crying would be too simple, too expected, a response borrowed from the movies rather than drawn from her own heart. Instead, she sat with the weight of loss, letting it settle into her bones, acknowledging it without trying to escape it. Thomas found her there when he came down for breakfast. He did not ask what was wrong. He simply sat beside her, took her hand, and waited. "He was a good man," Eleanor said finally. "I know," Thomas said. "You told me. I never thanked him properly. I never told him what he meant to me." Thomas squeezed her hand. "Maybe you did," he said. "Maybe thanks is not always about words. Maybe it is about what you do with what someone gives you. You have spent the last 15 years teaching young actors to be kind, to be generous, to remember that they are human beings first and performers second. Maybe that is the thanks he would have wanted." Eleanor considered this. It was true that she had tried to pass on what Bogart had given her. Every young actor who walked through the doors of Margaret's theatre, who now bore Eleanor's name on the program as artistic director, heard the same message: be kind, be generous. Remember that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you cannot see. She had told Bogart's story hundreds of times, not as a name-dropping anecdote or a brush-with-fame boast, but as a parable about what really matters. She had watched young faces light up with recognition as they understood that the greatest actors are not the ones with the most talent, but the ones with the most humanity. Perhaps Thomas was right. Perhaps that was thanks enough. The funeral was held on January 18th, a private service attended only by family and close friends. Eleanor was not invited, and she did not expect to be. She had been a small chapter in a long life, a few pages in a novel that spanned decades. But she wanted to mark the occasion somehow, to acknowledge the passing of the man who had changed her trajectory. So she organized a memorial at the theatre, a gathering of actors and artists who had been touched, directly or indirectly, by the philosophy Bogart had shared with her all those years ago. They filled the warehouse. More than 200 people crowded into the space that had once seemed so bare and empty. Margaret, now in her 70s, spoke first, telling stories about the early days of the company, about the actors who had passed through, about the lives that had been changed by the simple act of giving someone a chance. Then Eleanor took the stage. She told the story of August 1942. She told it simply, without embellishment, without drama. She described the heat, the lights, the moment she collapsed. She described the glass of water, the sandwich, the business card. She described the words Bogart had spoken, words that had stayed with her for 15 years and would stay with her for the rest of her life. "He told me that kindness is not weakness," she said. "He told me that the best people in this business are the ones who never forget how to be human. He told me that we survive not by protecting ourselves from each other, but by protecting each other." She paused, looking out at the faces gathered before her. "I do not know if Humphrey Bogart remembered me. I do not know if our conversation meant as much to him as it did to me, but I know that he changed my life, and I know that, in some small way, I have tried to change yours. That is how kindness works. It does not stay in one place, it ripples outward, touching lives we will never know, changing the world in ways we cannot measure." She took a deep breath. "So if you remember nothing else from tonight, remember this. You have the power to change someone's life with a single act of kindness. You have the power to be the person who sees someone struggling and reaches out a hand. You do not have to be famous. You do not have to be powerful. You just have to be willing to see another human being, truly see them, and respond with compassion." She smiled, feeling the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. "That is the legacy Humphrey Bogart left me, and that is the legacy I hope to leave you." The room was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. Others joined in. The applause built and built until it filled the warehouse, a wave of sound that carried all the gratitude and love and hope that words could not express. Eleanor stood on the stage, tears finally falling, and she understood that this was what survival looked like. Not fame, not fortune, not seeing your name in lights, but standing in a room full of people whose lives you have touched, knowing that the kindness you received has been multiplied 1,000-fold. Bogart had given her a glass of water. She had turned it into an ocean. Chapter 6. Eleanor Mitchell lived until 1998. passing peacefully in her sleep at the age of 75. Her obituary appeared in a small local newspaper, noting her contributions to community theatre and her decades of work training young actors. It did not mention Humphrey Bogart. It did not describe the moment that had set her on her path. It did not capture the full scope of a life lived in service to kindness, but her legacy lived on. Her daughter, Margaret, became a documentary filmmaker, specializing in stories about ordinary people who had done extraordinary things. She made a film about her mother in 1995, a quiet, intimate portrait that included interviews with dozens of actors who had trained at Eleanor's theatre. The film was never widely released, but it circulated among acting programs and drama schools, becoming a kind of underground classic, passed from hand to hand like a secret treasure. In it, actor after actor described the same experience, arriving at Eleanor's theatre broken, discouraged, ready to give up, and leaving transformed. Not because Eleanor had taught them to be better actors, though she had done that too, but because she had taught them to be better human beings. One actor, a young man named David, who had gone on to a successful career in television, described his first meeting with Eleanor. "I was arrogant," he said. "I thought I knew everything. I thought technique was all that mattered, but Eleanor saw right through me. She told me a story about a man who had given her a glass of water when she was starving, and how that simple act had changed her life. And she said, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you are not willing to see the people around you, if you are not willing to be kind when it is easier to be selfish, then none of it matters. You will never be the actor you could be, because you will never be the human being you could be." He paused, wiping his eyes. "I never forgot that. Every time I walk onto a set, every time I interact with a crew member or a fellow actor or a complete stranger, I think about that story. I think about the glass of water, and I try to be the person who offers it." The documentary ends with footage of Eleanor in her final years, sitting in the theatre that bore her name, surrounded by photographs and memorabilia from decades of productions. She is asked what she hopes people will remember about her. She thinks for a moment, then smiles. "I hope they remember that kindness matters," she says. "I hope they remember that we are all connected, that what we do for one person ripples out and touches others we will never meet. I hope they remember that the greatest achievement is not fame or fortune, but the lives we touch along the way." She pauses, looking directly into the camera. "A man gave me a glass of water once. That is all. A glass of water and a sandwich and a few words of advice. But it changed everything. It set me on a path that led here, to this room, to this moment, to all of you, and I like to think that somewhere, somehow he knows. I like to think that he is proud of what his kindness created." The camera holds on her face for a long moment. There are tears in her eyes, but she is smiling. "They do not make men like him anymore," she says softly. "But maybe if we try hard enough, if we remember what really matters, we can become a little bit more like him. Not famous, not powerful, but kind, human, real." The screen fades to black. In the archives of Warner Brothers, there is a photograph from the set of Casablanca. It shows a crowd of extras gathered in Rick's cafe, their faces lit by the glow of studio lights. Somewhere in that crowd, though she cannot be identified, is Eleanor Mitchell, 19 years old, dreaming of a future she could not yet imagine. And somewhere just out of frame, there is Humphrey Bogart, watching, waiting, about to perform an act of kindness that would echo through generations. That is the power of such moments. They seem small when they happen. A glass of water, a few words, a business card pressed into a trembling hand, but they contain everything. They contain the possibility of transformation, the promise that one human being can change another's life with nothing more than attention and compassion. Bogart never knew the full extent of what he had created. He never knew about the theatre company that Eleanor would run for 40 years, about the hundreds of actors she would train, about the philosophy of kindness that would spread outward like ripples on a pond. He never knew that a single act of decency on a sweltering afternoon would become a legacy that outlasted any of his films. But perhaps in some way he suspected. Perhaps that is why he told Eleanor his own story, about the stranger who had helped him when he was young and broke and ready to give up. Perhaps he understood that kindness is not a single act, but a chain, each link connected to the one before and the one after, stretching back through history and forward into the future. We are all links in that chain. Every day we have the opportunity to add to it or to break it. Every interaction, every moment of attention or inattention, every choice to see another human being or to look away, these are the decisions that determine who we are and who we will become. Eleanor Mitchell understood this. She lived it, and now her story passes to you. If you watch this far, it is because you felt something. It is because this story touched a part of you that still believes in kindness, in connection, in the possibility that we can be better than we are. I want to know who you are. I want to know that this story found its way to the right person. So leave a comment right now. Just say, I watched this far. Let me know that you are here, that you are part of this community, that you understand what these stories are really about. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you of something important, then I need you to do 3 more things. First, hit that subscribe button. This channel exists to tell stories like this one, stories of quiet decency in a world that has forgotten what that means. Every week we explore the moments that made legends human, the acts of kindness that history almost forgot. If you want to be part of that, if you want to be reminded that character matters more than fame, then subscribe now. Join us. Become part of this community. Second, leave a like. It seems like such a small thing, but it matters. It tells the algorithm that this story deserves to be seen by others. It helps us reach people who need to hear this message, who need to be reminded that kindness still exists in the world. Your like is not just a click, it is a vote for the kind of content you want to see more of. Third, share this video. Think of someone in your life who needs to hear this story. Maybe they are struggling. Maybe they are losing faith in people. Maybe they just need to be reminded that a single act of kindness can change everything. Share it with them. Pass the story on. Become a link in the chain that Eleanor Mitchell spent her whole life building. That is how we survive this world. Not by protecting ourselves from each other. By protecting each other, a glass of water, a few words, a moment of seeing another human being in their struggle and choosing to help. That is the legacy of Humphrey Bogart. That is the lesson Eleanor Mitchell taught for 50 years, and now it is yours. It is, they do not make men like him anymore, but maybe if we try hard enough we can become a little bit more like him. Kind, human, real. Until next time.